1, 0, all engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
It's Monday. It's Monday. It really is. 7 o'clock. And that can mean only one thing. It's time for Reading the Signs, where me, Comedy John Ryan, and my comedian pals from all over the world are going to be talking about comedy, well-being, why we do it, how we cope. And that's where we need your help. We need you to send us your top tips for well-being. Be part of the show. Drop a comment in the box on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, on the mensradiostation.com website. It's going to be a great show, much better than last week. What we're trying to do is think exceptional, which, funnily enough, is the motto of WJ, our show sponsors. WJ are the UK's leading road marking and highway maintenance company. They're working with us, we're working with you. Let's get to it.
Oh! Good evening, everybody. Welcome along once again to Reading the Signs with me, John Ryan. It's going to be a great night tonight. I've got an absolutely fantastic guest, one of my favourite comics, one of my favourite writers, just an all-round good guy. So it's really nice when you get a chance to hang out with interesting people who are decent too. But before then, tell me how your week's been. What have you guys been up to? How's life? Has it worked out for you? Have you had a good week? Have you had a bad week? You know, has it been really? Come on, tell me. Be honest. Let's all be honest. I've had a pretty spectacular week. I'm not going to lie. I went to Manchester. Good. Lashing down with rain as it always is. And I forget, because we've not been travelling too much for a while, I forget that the weather systems in the country change when you get up north. So leaving my little Essex hidey home in the glorious sunshine, I wasn't prepared for the monsoon. That was Manchester, but it was great to go up there. I did a day on leadership, and then I also did some sessions on well-being. So that was pretty cool. And then I've spent 2 days painting the house. So a little bit of me time. And what I really don't like is when I'm trying to have a little bit of me time painting my house, people ring me up and offer me work. It's terrible, really. It gets in the way, doesn't it? The clocks have gone back, so it's now dark in the evenings. And I know a lot of people don't like the dark and the cold, but just think about us chubbies, and we struggle in the sunshine, in the heat. I'm a natural ginger, so the sun is my enemy. But I don't moan when you're sitting there in your bikinis and your shorts and your swimming trunks, drinking freezing cold cocktails. I just sit there sweating and mumbling to myself, counting down the days to the glorious rain and cold that is October, November, December, January, February, March, and the rest of the year if you're in Manchester. Well-being and mental health is like the weather, because like I say, today it's been cold and rainy, and I think it's been a great day. But if you like the sunshine, then today has been a tough day for you. And that's how we've got to think about wellness and well-being. It's different for different people. The same experience can be subjectively encountered differently depending on who you are. That's all the clever stuff out of the way. So let me know that you're there. If you are in the comments box, then do pop us a little note. As ever, at some stage, we may well have Natasha Donovan answering comments. So if you're not used to the show, or if you're a friend of Paul's, you're going to be told that you're loved, because she loves everyone. She spends the whole evening just going, hello, I love you, when really she's meant to be just being positive. Just a quick reminder, we're not clinicians, we're not practitioners. Paul and I are just blokes who seem to be all right, doing all right. And what we're going to get into tonight is about what makes us be all right, because I know for a lot of people it's very difficult. So tonight's guest, Paul Kerensa, probably worked with him on and off over the last 20 years. Don't work with him that often, but he's someone who really made a big impression on me when I first started doing comedy, because he's a really decent human being. And entertainment comedy tends to be a very cutthroat business where people think they've got to be mean and ambitious to succeed. Well, he never struck me as that sort of guy, but he's done exceptionally well despite being limited by being nice. He writes on one of my favourite shows, one of the greatest sitcoms this country's ever produced, Not Going Out. He also runs a Christmas and Carol gigs that we'll talk about, which is some of the best. And he does Paul's Thought 4 on a Sunday morning with my mate, the Rabbi Alex. So, yeah, I'm a fan, as ever. It's an absolute honour to welcome someone on who I believe has integrity and is a funny, all-around human being. So please, with that in mind, let's all give a big hello to Mr. Paul Kerensa. How you doing, mate?
I'm well, thank you. Thanks for having me. Exciting to be here.
You've even got the voice, man. You've even got the You've got that
Wow.
smooth tones. You've got.
It's a year and a half of lockdown practice. That's what that is.
So what have you been doing today, Paul? What have you been doing?
What haven't I been doing today? He said, stalling for time while he remembers what he's been doing today, because I've reached that time of life. I can't remember now. And tell you what I've been doing actually is I've pivoted in the last year and a half. What with gigs being what they are and the like. So I do the stand-up, I do the writing, but I'm now starting to lecture at University of Winchester in screenwriting. So I've been writing this week's 2-hour lecture on screenwriting. So there you are.
Wow. And so how let's go get your pen, get your paper, put a date in the top left-hand corner, margin down the side. Is it still like that?
About right. Yeah. I wish it were. I wish it the simpler times. So much of it for me has been learning the tech. Really, a bit like this now, in this crazy world we're in where we're having to adapt all the time. So I'm amazed actually. The students of today, just look at me sounding old, but it's all the lectures are recorded for them. So if they have to self-isolate, if they're not there, they can't make it, they can watch it back later, they can revise it later. So arguably, is there any reason for them to be there in the room in the first place? They can watch it on TV and just take notes.
So interesting. Well, let's start with that. Is there any reason for them to be there in the first place?
Well, of course, yeah. I mean, this is, and it's an ongoing thing. Not forget just students and lecturers and the like. But for years now, when I've been a writer with my writing hat on, we write remotely most of the time. I'm at home writing or service stations on the way to gigs. But now and then you get to go into a writer's room, and there is nothing like it. And one of my concerns with this whole pandemic-y situation and working from home and so on is it obviously encourages people to do stuff from home, which is great. I'm chatting to you from my place to your place, and that's a marvelous thing. We've not gathered in a radio studio, but there's nothing like being there, is there, really? And now and then gathering, being there, so you can just see, the whites of their eyes is no doubt a good thing, I think.
So were you a funny child?
Well, yes and no. I was never like the life and soul of the party. Still not the life and soul of the party, as many comedians in green rooms will testify. In fact, I've been introduced a few times by certain smarmy, I can think of them exactly, like the jonglers and the like, when I was an open spot. And the compere would say, he's had us in fits backstage. He's non-stop talking, knowing full well that I was there cowarding in the corner, sort of, not joining in with all of the banter and the like. Because I was there sort of, I've always been better. And as a kid, I was like kind of on the outskirts of the big group, able to just lob in a quick pithy one-liner at the right time and duck down so no one could quite see where it came from. So that was more me, just trying to punctuate it. Kind of, what's that thing? Peacemaking, I suppose. If there's tension, puncture it with a joke, but duck down so no one can quite see where it's come from. They just kind of hopefully move away, ideally a bit happy with their lives, or not, or if sometimes it's a barbed comment, in which case I particularly duck down so they can't see that it was me with this pithy response to the teacher and someone else.
Where were you brought up?
Well, I was born in Cornwall till the age of 5, and then moved to Surrey, where I still am now, and I've not left since I was 5, really. So it was North Surrey. I've always said it's like the village of Dibley in the county of Midsummer. It was like, one church, 6 pubs, a village hall, scouts, cubs, all that sort of stuff. And it's one of those. So I now live in Guildford, but that was like village life, village people.
Guildford's an interesting place, isn't it? I remember doing the Guildford Festival, and people had bought tie-dyed T-shirts, and they get dropped off by mums and dads at the gate. And I thought it was wonderful, but they were all kind of embarrassed. And so I go, I was like, no, be proud of who you are, what you are, where you're from.
Yeah, I like Guildford. I mean, I was at school here, and I'm still here now, decades later. And in fact, I was in Guildford on the day with my wife. We've not been out to Guildford much lately. We're sort of, I suppose, a half-hour walk from the town centre, and we were going through Guildford. And I kept saying, about 3 times, I said, I really like Guildford. It's got a cobbled high street, some nice old shops, all that sort of. But we were looking around at the same time. You could see that there are, lots of gaps of shops, and all the closed. There's a lot to not like about it. But I suppose I choose to see what's nice about it. But my wife was looking at me going, "Can you stop saying you really like Guildford? It's just a bit weird now." And I go, okay, fair enough. I can take.
I always
I
associate
like
with
it.
cyclists for some reason.
I've not found one, so there's
because
one
it's
here
like-
somewhere, I'm sure. You know.
It's cyclists all accounts.
You might be right.
So what made you start doing comedy? Did you do it straight away as soon as you left university or school, or?
No, well, I did it. So I did a theology degree, and then,
Wow.
but I didn't know why. Really, it's one of those. I thought, well, I'm quite
Why not?
interested in this. I can't see myself. It wasn't a vocational thing. It was like, you
Yeah.
know. In fact, our New Testament lecturer was one of the most staunch atheists in the theological trade, and you know, but it was, you know, I enjoyed doing it, and it got me thinking. But really, it got me at university where I discovered the theatre, and I spent my third year mostly in that theatre, writing plays, putting on plays, discovering comic acting, and all that stuff, and using the fact you have access to you know, free actors and free performance space and all that stuff. Left there, went to drama school for a year just because I loved it, but realized I couldn't really act. And
So after your degree, you went to drama school for a year.
I did. It was like a 1 year post-grad course, and that was vocational. That was, you will become an actor at the end of this. And then I finished it, and I thought, now's not a good time to discover I can't really act, but I enjoy it. And I enjoyed writing comedy, acting comedy. Wow,
okay. A little bit of a Mac 10 moment now. We seem to have we've lost you there for some reason, mate. I don't know what happened. Yep, absolutely. You've completely disappeared. Well, while Paul's sorting out his IT, because his sound has gone and is having a little rearrange there. Just let me bring up to speed on just some of the things this guy does. All right, he, as he's alluded to, he does stand-up comedy. He also writes plays. Some of them very, very good. I was going to talk to him about one in particular in a little while. Not Going Out, one of the greatest TV shows this country's ever produced, as far as I'm concerned. He does that, and Pause for Thought, of course. Has his own show on BBC Radio Sussex and Surrey. He's now lecturing at Winchester University on screenwriting. So he's got a lot to say, but it's just if we can get him to say it, because he's in the cupboard. Still get it to work, mate. Any luck?
Well, I'm here. I can hear me.
There you go. There you go. I can hear you now. I think sitting in the cupboard has definitely helped.
It is basically for those with visual access. I've moved across the room to plug in the old Ethernet cable, and
very good.
But there's no the lighting's terrible here. So, yeah,
that's all right. But you look like you're like reporting from a war zone. I'm in the cupboard because you're holding the mic. It's like proper old school, mate. Old school.
Is that I've got no table
skills.
in this corner? I'm just kneeling on the floor. Look, there you go. I'm just kneeling on the floor. So he's like the corner of Guildford here. This is it.
Get yourself comfortable, mate. Just I'm all about people being comfy.
I've got my doggy doorstop, and
mate, this is just getting a bit weird there. It's turned into one of those 50s American rock and roll type films like Grease. So tell us then. So you finished college, done a year of drama, and then was that when the stand-up started?
Yeah. So then I left drama school and realized I couldn't act. And I walked down the street. It was a rainy day. It was one of those sort of you pull your collar up sort of thing. And I saw an advert for a stand-up comedy evening class. And I thought, I'll try it once, put it on the CV, get more acting. And I thought, forget acting. This is what I want to do. Stand up. It's lovely. And there's nothing like it. Once you've done it, it's just you get the bug, don't you? That's it.
Where was your first ever gig?
So I did the stand-up course ended with a gig, but that wasn't a proper gig because that was like invite your friends and it's the end of the course. So after that, then I lived in Woking at the time. So Inky Jones,
that's where we met.
Club in Woking. I think it was actually. It was. Yeah. And then after third gig was Laughing Horse Richmond. I kind of count that as my first kind of circuit gig. Laughing Horse Richmond. Suddenly I got to meet comedians, realize there's a circuit, there's a community, there's a camaraderie and all that sort of thing. So that was that was a real magical moment, I think.
Did it go well the first gig?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a general adage people say, but I've heard it said like, first 10 gigs, you'll have a bit of everything. And I would say my first 6 gigs went really nicely, enough that I thought, I really want to do this. I think I found the thing I should be doing. And then like gig 7 was the one, the trench, the trough you fall into. And that was the one, I think. But that's fine, because in your first 10 gigs, you get a bit of everything. And then your first 100 gigs, they say you really get a bit of everything. And my 100th gig was the Comedy Store, 5-minute spot at the Gong Show. They just brought back the King Gong Show for that. So that was nice to be able to do even though it's, just 5 minutes, but to do the Store, my 100th gig was that felt kind of nice. That was good.
And so did you have a day job then, or were you just doing comedy full time?
Yeah, I was temping. So I'd left drama school, did the temping thing. I had good words per minute, so a lot of secretarial stuff. But whenever they offered me permanent, they said, oh yeah, you've got good words per minute. You can get a job here full time. And I go, oh no, and quickly left that job. So as soon as they offered me some sense of commitment, I ran a mile. What that says about me, you'd be the judge. But yeah, that was that. Yeah.
And then you got a little bit of recognition with the BBC, was it the New Act of the Year?
Yeah, so in fact, I think the first one I did was ITV's Take the Mic, which was they only did 2 series of that, and it was I would say that was before they worked out how to do stand up on TV. So it was like late night on a Tuesday, before Live at the Apollo, when stand up on TV was only ever there was the BBC stand up show at the time, which was like midnight on a Saturday, Tommy Tin, and it was stand up then I would say was still in that kind of early noughties. Everything felt a bit late night and edgy, and not a shiny floor and a polished suit in sight, So ITV's Take the Mic was the first competition I sort of really did, and I won it, which was lovely. And I got £1,000 and an agent who then instantly took that £1,000 off me. So that went quickly. And then I did the BBC New Comedy Awards around that same sort of time, really. And did the finalist in that. And then so it gave me a little boost in the career, I guess, early on. But I think within 2 or 3 years, I realized that boost was kind of there was a bit of a dip, I suppose, but you realize the boost's only going to get you so far, and which is fine, because everyone's got a sort of a pace they go at. So that was fine, and I'm still 20 years on. I've celebrated my 20th anniversary this year. There are fireworks right now to celebrate that fact.
To celebrate for you, you put it on just especially for us. And then you carry on. It's interesting that you said about you tried to do the jonglers kind of open spot and the kind of the banter and the way the lads would go on. Were you comfortable at those sort of gigs?
I would say not really, and hugely. I tried to get comfortable at those gigs, and I honestly don't know if you can hear me over the fireworks.
Yeah, I can hear you. It's fine.
It is literally like a war. It's like a war zone. It is, as you said. I'm hiding behind a cupboard.
You're hiding in a cupboard.
We've got missiles
outside.
Paul
Kerensa reporting from Guildford. We're coming under fire.
It is brutal. It's a Catherine wheel, and got a sparkler. So that was the circuit I felt at the time. Like, you had got to do a bit of jonglersy stuff, and the art centres were a nice treat, I found, at the end of it all. But it did feel like if you're going to do it properly, that's what you do, and the job, because at the time when, I don't know, jonglers had 30 gigs around the country, and you get comedians who go, oh yeah, I do it every weekend. And, I did 20 weekend 20-minute slots there for a while, but I really found that I was having to kind of make my material a bit bawdier and a bit late night. And it was always a bit of and that's not me, really. It's just not me. So I do sort of say no regrets and all that, but at the same time, I was trying to be something I'm not really. And I mean, still now and then I get those gigs, I'm generally a family friendly, good, clean act, but sometimes you get a golf club gig or a rugby club dinner or something. And I think, A, there's been a misbooking here, but B, let's get through this, and, but then inevitably I'll drive home and think, that's not me. What am I doing? So, it's a lot of ongoing process to be myself.
It's kind of interesting because for me, I was born into this physiology that makes me look like a football hooligan. And so when I went to do like the jonglersy kind of gigs, people just presumed that I was at home at those gigs. Now, obviously, I could lad it up or whatever. I remember one night, and after the interval, the lineup was me, Steve Gribbin, and John Bishop. And I remember thinking, wow, this is how it should be. This is exactly how it should be. Because the problem was the act made the audience baldy. And it wasn't the other way around. They were. It's this whole. I did sociology for my sins at university as part of a degree, and I remember one of the things was, do we shape or reflect our audience, right? And I found very early on that very often the compares would try and shape their audience, whereas when I did your gigs, I was much more comfortable. I remember doing a church up the road from me and loving it.
Oh yeah,
And when I got there, one of the other acts said, well, this can be interesting. I said, what do you mean? He went, well, you're a jonglers act. I said, what's that mean, a jonglers act? Well, you're used to stags and hens. I went, people go to church who are stags and hens, mate.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And it's that thing about being an all-rounder. I think a lot of the time on the circuit kind of goes against you. I had an agent who said, you've got to just be one thing and stick to it because I can't market you. Whereas actually not being marketable gave me more opportunities. And I see you very much like that as well.
Well, I think, in fact, I'll tell you about, there's a gig I did in on the South Coast years ago now, probably 10 years ago. And I think it was a pretty bawdy gig, rough gig. It was a rough gig. In fact, it was a converted church, ironically. And actually come down.
Eastbourne? Was that in Eastbourne?
It was Bournemouth, actually.
Bournemouth,
yeah.
Bournemouth, I know it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was lively, and it was stag do's and hen do's and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, it was always, Comedy Store, jonglers-y type acts, and I was sort of always on like third out of, kind of buried around the interval sort of thing. But then about third time I did it, and I never really enjoyed it, but it paid, so I did it. And about third time I did it, the novel word had got around about this gig, and a lot of acts suddenly stopped doing it. And if that night, 2 acts just didn't turn up, and they just said, "Yeah, we don't like the gig, not going to bother coming." Just didn't show. And it was me, and it was Gary Delaney, and that was it. The punster, Gary Delaney. So it was like just the 2 of us was the entire lineup left, and obviously Gary's like, "Well, I just do jokes. So can you just go on first? Can you start?" So I went on, but because I suddenly was promoted, whatever you want to call it, to compare and to start the show, it was a lovely gig. And we had stags in, and I spoke to them, and we had a little chat and all that. But it wasn't the bawdy gig that I remember it being.
No, because you shaped it. You shaped it.
Yeah, because exactly, it was lively enough, but it wasn't that kind of filth fest that it had become in my head.
Oh, mate, we've got to do this. We've got to put some sense and put on filth fest.
It was because previously it had been, I think it had been horrid. It had been a really rough. It was like the you shaking the cage really, and really antagonizing some of the audience. But I found actually you walk on and be nice, and people are nice back generally.
There you go. There's a simple guide, isn't it? So for anyone just tuning in or listening to the podcast on Spotify, or if you're watching us now on YouTube or LinkedIn or Twitter, or on the mensradiostation.com website, or listening to us on Deluxe Radio, wherever you are. Welcome along. I'm John Ryan. This week, my guest is the fantastic talent that is Mr. Paul Kerensa. I'd like to quickly thank our sponsors, WJ, who are the UK's leading road marking specialists. Tonight, we're talking all things comedy. Paul, one of the best writers, in my opinion, in the country. And as I've repeatedly said, I've always been impressed by the kind of integrity that he displays. So how did you start doing your own little circuit of gigs then? Where did that idea come from?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I have a circuit of gigs really. I was invited to do a couple of events in churches years ago now. And I remember the first couple I did just didn't really work because I think because I just walked on and just did my normal act, just the clean stuff, or, as I was mostly clean anyway at that point. But at that time, I certainly had a few lively jokes that I'd inherited from the Jonglers set. And also that's before I had kids as well, I noticed. I think when I had kids, I think I probably suddenly thought a bit twice about certain jokes I was doing and thought, oh, do I want to put that into the world and things like that? So I've never
put that into the world. You should be writing these things down, mate. It's just giving them away. He's giving them away.
Do I want to pollute the audience's minds? I was never Frankie Boyle, but at the same time, I was, as we've just said before, I was, I'd inherit certain things that you bring to a jonglers gig, and I'd, changing kind of the comedy I was doing a bit. But then you invited to a couple of events at churches, but I was just doing a clean set. And I swiftly realised that wasn't the way to approach those gigs. That I always feel like now if I'm doing an event in a church or something, or a school or anywhere that's not a mainstream gig, you've got to spend a couple of minutes reassuring the audience, like, it's going to be okay. Comedy in this environment, it's going to be fine. But sometimes they need a little bit of a gentle encouragement that actually, especially I do a lot of church events now. And the thing is that I always find half the audience, who are the church regulars, are worried it's going to be too rude. And the other half, who they've invited, are worried it's going to be too twee. So you've got to spend about 3 or 4 minutes just appeasing both lots. Say, you know what, it's going to be fine. It's not, and I often just tell them that. I say, you half think it's going to be twee. You half think it's going to be rude. It's going to be neither. It's going to be fine. Comedy's comedy. Let's have a bit of fun, So, just meet them where they are.
It's interesting because around 2003, so I started around the same time as you, but I realised that I was never going to try and get onto any of the panel shows or the TV shows. It just wasn't going to, that I wasn't what I was looking for. So I then went and started doing the cruise ships. And on the cruise ships, you have to be clean. They don't like profanity and swearing. Well, if you spend time with me, you'll see that I'm normally, I don't generally swear and oi, oi, everybody. So that's more natural to me. And so then when I started going into schools and colleges, especially doing my health stuff, that's my natural home. And I then go and do a comedy gig, and I actually have to become a persona to get through it. And when we talk about well-being, it's that thing as well, where people have to get this persona on board to fit in. And again, you kind of alluded to it with the Jonglers thing and that. But I always was fascinated by the fact that you were quite open about your faith, and you go, well, I want to write for television. How do I do that? And I say to people, the path is different. You don't have to follow a set path. If you can bring yourself and your life experience to your writing, opportunities will come. That seems to me to be the path that you've pursued.
Yeah, I think so. I think I mean, with all of those things, I've just tried stuff, and I've said yes to things. And I remember, who was it? I think it was actually Reverend Richard Coles, ironically, said to me years ago that he says yes to everything unless he's got a really good reason not to, and you just try stuff, you go for it. So the TV writing for me came from like writing for radio, just sending jokes off to radio shows, being nice, being available, trying to become the producer's go-to person for jobs. And all of the jobs I've ever had for writing for TV and things have just been from getting to know a producer and then being the person they try and call on.
But then how do you cope with that rejection then when your ideas aren't bought or you're not wanted?
Yeah, I mean, it's happened this year, and in the last year I must have pitched half a dozen ideas for things, and most of them don't make it. And I approach every project now hoping for the best, preparing for the worst. In fact, I remember one of the project that sort of almost most affected me was for the afternoon play for Radio 4, and I was bending the ear of the producer of it and sent him off some ideas. He said he was interested in hearing some ideas from me, sent a few ideas in. And normally, you send it off, you go away, you come back a few days later and move on to another project very quickly, So by the time they reject you, you've moved on anyway, to another thing. And if they don't reject me, then it's a nice surprise they've not rejected me. But in this case, I handed it in, the afternoon play thing, and he replied 20 minutes later saying, sorry, it's not for us. 20 minutes later. Not getting me time. Come back. I've not started the project yet. Give me a chance to move on myself first.
Have you read it? Oh, mate, I remember when I was about 16 asking a girl out, and she went, well, I'm waiting for Steve. I thought he was going to ask me out. But if he doesn't, I'll go out with you. And then I had to wait around to see if Steve would ask her out. And he did. So that was it. I was like,
together now.
I loitered. I just loitered around thinking, I'll just wait here.
Well, do you want to be second best? You're going to be Steve's leftovers.
Yeah, I've got. Yeah, this is one. Listen to theology and religion and philosophy. But it's that thing of how we cope with that rejection. That's what people don't realise. And I always remember reading. I can't remember who it was. Just as an author saying that he had so many rejection slips he could wallpaper his whole house.
Yeah,
so you've managed to have quite a bit of success with publishing, haven't you? With writing.
I've done a few books, but it's been a bit of a weird one, in fact, because I've got the books over there. I've done a book on the history of Christmas, some children's books. I think I've done 9 books now, maybe 10, depending on how you define it. But even that they've all been for a fairly niche market, which I suppose is the Christian publishing market. And in each case, the publishers approached me, said, "Do you want to do a children's book? Do you want to do a book on Christmas?" "Yes, I do. Yes, I do." Yeah. But right now, I'm writing a mainstream novel, historical novel. It's not. I've not got a publisher. I'm actually going to self-publish it. Not through. I've not tried publishers. I've not. It's not that I'm doing self-publishing as a second best. I've just seen other people do it and thought, yeah, I'd like that sense of control over my career. I'd like to be able to do it myself, market it myself, get it out there. I don't want to do it with a Christian publisher, I don't think. It's not a Christian book. It's a mainstream book, and I just want people to just read it without thinking, oh, it's a Christian book sort of thing. Although probably people will still go, oh, look at him, he's a god botherer. It's one of those, isn't it? But yeah, I'm still learning, in terms of getting books out there and working out the best way to do it. And I think each project you kind of start from scratch to a certain degree. You've got links and contacts you can use and knowledge you can certainly use. But every single project starts from scratch, working out what's best for it and seeing where it might end up.
So where's your passion? Is it the stand-up? Is it the publishing? Is it the radio writing? Is it the TV writing?
Pass. I like them all. It's really tricky, and I mean, I love stand-up. I've really missed stand-up when we've not been able to do it, over the last year and a bit, on and off. And but I enjoy. I do like writing, but I think rather than enjoy writing, I enjoy having written. Because it can be quite a slog. I'm trying to write a novel and a sort of drama script, and I'm I'm doing a pass at someone else's feature film, a comedy feature film, thing he's trying to get in development and stuff like that. But they do feel like, difficult work when you're doing it, I find. But then you look back and think, oh, I've done that thing. That's a good thing. I like that.
But you see, so many times in my life, I've met people who've gone, I want to be a writer, and they never do. And
right.
Then people often say to me, well, how have you managed it? And I'll say, it's a simple secret, right? What you do is you write. There you go. There you go.
Well, it's interesting. There are 2 different definitions I've heard. Russell T. Davis, the Doctor Who modern creator of it, said, you are not. Russell T. Davis would not define me as a writer, I don't think, because he would say, additional material, you're not a writer. You've got to come up with an idea, write it fully. You are the sole writer, and then that is yours. You are a writer. Stephen King, though, says if you've ever written anything, and you got $10 for it, and you cashed that check, and you used it to, to power your house, to light your, put the lights on, you're a writer. If you can pay, get someone to buy anything you've done for a few pennies, congratulations, you've made someone, happy with.
But see, it fascinates me because what we're then doing is we're allowing other people to define who we are, right?
Yeah.
Whereas I, again, which is why I've got so much respect for you, I define myself with you. So, like I said in the preamble, I this week did some leadership talks, then I did some mental well-being talks, then I'm doing this. I'm going to self-publish a book in a few weeks. So no one can say to me, you're not successful or you're not actually doing it, because I pay my bills with this. And me and it's either right or down at the docks would be the only alternative, I suppose. But it's that thing of when I go to Tesco's, the money I give them, I need for doing this.
Yeah. And I think even then, if you've got a mission and an idea and a project that you want to work on, and it's not being paid at that point, if you've not found a way to monetize it, it's still worthwhile, because if that's fueling you in some way, and you've got an idea and you're going for it. I started a podcast last year in the lockdown based on this book I'm trying to write. At the minute, that entire project has not really earned much of a penny, because I'm still writing the book. No one's bought it yet. There's no deadline. There's no commission. As a podcast, it's costing me to do it, but I'm dedicated to it. I'm committed to doing it, and I love doing it. And I'm a creator, I suppose, because of that, even though no one's paid me a penny for it. Although that being said, I do say, hey, Patreon, and then people join up to that maybe, but it's still working at a loss because the podcast is costing so much to do, but I love it. And it's a bit of writing, it's a bit of broadcasting, a bit of producing, but it's just creating. And I think that's a great thing. Why not? Be create, not destroy. Hey.
Tell us about the carols and comedy. How did that come about?
Yeah, well, that was, and ironically, it was actually this very same year that Robin Ince, a fellow comedian, started a version that he's been doing sort of on and off ever since. And it was basically, so my version was based on the traditional 9 lessons in carol service. Now, in this book I did on the history of Christmas, this will come up in there. 1880 was the very first 9 lessons in carol service. Christmas Eve in Truro Cathedral in Cornwall. I'm a proud Cornishman, so I thought, let's continue that tradition. And so we did 9 comedians in carols, and the idea being that each comedian would do a set loosely based on one of the 9 lessons you would have in the traditional carol service, or maybe someone does something really tenuously based on shepherds or animals or sheep or something, or the wise men, something vaguely on God, whatever it might be. So just a bit of fun, feeling a bit Christmassy. Comedy at Christmas, and it was really a way of getting away from some of those Christmas gigs, the jonglers gigs and the like could be horrific. So I thought, I love Christmas and it's my favorite time of year. Why, yet the gigs have been awful, so or can be tough. So I started it. We did it as a one-off, like pilot thing. My local church down the road, they were great, and that was about 17 years ago now, something like that. And it's been growing ever since. I've got another dozen or so dates this December. We go all around the country. I no longer do 9 comedians in carols because it was a long show, and
it was,
that's a bit much. So yeah, we do sort of 3 or 4 now sometimes, but often it's just me. Sometimes it's just comedy and carols, and it just depends on their budget. If you've got a budget, you get more. So we see.
I try to not work in December weekends because of that office party kind of mentality in that, and because I can try to get to work the rest of the year. Just before lockdown this year, I'll just do anything, but up until lockdown, but principles. I just remember Spiky Mike. He runs a gig in a big Methodist place in Retford. There's like about 300-400 people, and the last time I did it was me and Jeff Norcott, and it was fantastic. And it was just really nice to watch Jeff, who's one of the country's best comics, but him adapting to this audience who were essentially Christians, and it does strike me as odd.
If that's the gig, I think it is. Then in Retford, there was a church gig in Retford who I booked and ran their show. In fact, I was a regular compere there for about 6-7 years, and then it was a bit far for me. So I think I said you book it yourself. So, but yeah, they're a nice lot, and and he that particular minister, I know that his enthusiasm was just like, don't want to mention church. I just want to. This is a venue. It's the community. We want to put it on and be a bit of a centre for that. So great. Why not?
So then, how do you reconcile your faith with standing in front of like drunken, debauched audiences who want filth?
Yeah, when it's like the last days of Babylon sort of thing, Well, I mean, that's one of the things. Years ago, I would have said I was a Christian and I was going to church and things on a Sunday, but at the time I wasn't thinking, Monday to Saturday, I'm just doing all the gigs and wasn't really thinking too much about the content of my set, based on that. Nowadays, I think I'm probably, hopefully, a bit better at thinking actually what, if there is a God, and I think there is personally, then has he, am I doing him any favors by going on stage and slamming completely this particular community or this type of person, or punching down, basically, because a lot of it is, isn't it? And I don't mind, a bit of saucy language, but if it's punching up, not punching down, it's a different sort of thing. There's different sorts of.
I just love the idea. I love the idea that there's this great deity sitting on this giant throne, going, "What are my minions doing? What's Kerensa doing? He's doing jonglers.
Yeah,
call him back. Call him in."
I did a church gig about 5 years ago now with me and a couple of other comedians, Andy Kind, Tony Vino, again, both Christians and both very good comedians. And it was a church gig. It was an Anglican, like traditional Vicar of Dibley type church, Church of England type church, all pillars and Latin. And the vicar, he looked like Terry Pratchett, big long beard, cassock, gowns, all that, all the works, But he was literally leaning on the altar as he greeted us, like it's the bar, And he was effing and blinding completely. Go, "Oh, you guys, we're looking forward to a bleeping good show, and we can't wait to hear your bleeping jokes." Except he wasn't bleeping, And
it was a Catholic church. Sounds like Catholic.
It does, doesn't it? High Anglican, probably. But I think we all looked at each other and went, I think he felt like he was trying to be someone he wasn't. Yeah. He thought, I'm meeting comedians. I better swear a bit because that's their language, isn't it?
We're the wrong chaps.
Tell him, but we had to say to him, look, we're not going to be sweary ourselves. Not that we've got a problem with it, but the front row, they're all 90 and there are kids over there. There's a kid who's 9, you know. Yeah. So it's more like play the room you're in, you know. And in that sense, I think the vicar was trying a bit hard to be something that he wasn't. But yeah.
One of my best mates is a pastor. We've been friends for like 35, 40 years. And he will occasionally, the conversation normally start with, what are you doing on such and such a date? And I'll say, what do you want me to do? Go, well, I want you to come down and give a talk. I'm like, okay. What? So I'll turn up thinking I'm doing a talk in a hall. But no, he'll put me in the pulpit and he'll go, look, if you do 20 minutes on where was God in the battlefield, you know, so Remembrance Sundays, he tends to kind of give me a shout. Or what does it say in the Bible about mental health and well-being? And I'm like, hang on. I was brought up in such a devout, my mum was twice a day, she was a proper Christian. And, but she other thing was, you'd be a Catholic. No, it's like an insurance policy. You don't have to use it, but you get one chance, like one phone call. So I was an altar server. I had an audience with the Pope.
Did you?
Oh yeah. When I got married, we had a cardinal, 4 bishops, and we were like proper in there, mate. We was like the squad, bro. We was the squad. And it's funny because I'm not a churchgoer, but I respect people who have faith, because when we talk about like well-being and mental health, statistically, there's a lot of research that suggests that people with faith, devout people, tend to have fewer symptoms of depression than anxiety, because you're basically part of a group. Prayer is introspection, and you're talking to someone who isn't going to tell you what to do. And it's regular. It gets you out of the house. It gets you on going. So whilst everyone goes, oh, yeah, all the Catholic priests are all rapists, I'm sure they are. But you separate the faith bit from the religion part of it, and that's where the well-being bit comes from.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And I think whenever there's a failing in religion, and you know, whether it's priests and abuse, or whether it's, I mean, anything really like that. But certainly my heart sinks, and so do many other people I know. You just think, the work we've been doing to try and, you know, just make the faith, the religion, the whatever it is, the church, seem, you know, kind of just not that. Because most churchgoers I know, most Christians I know, are doing great things. You know, we got a church right behind our house. Just these lovely community, and they're out there doing things, getting meals to people, just doing lovely things. And then, you know, just when the wrong ones get all the, you know, the headlines, quite rightly they should be getting the headlines, but it's highly frustrating for the rest of it. And as you say, it's about that's the human, you know, failing that comes in religion, in politics, in media.
Where are those people?
Power, you know.
Yeah, the guy that married us and the guy that christened 2 of my kids, years later got, I think, 15 years in prison. Really? And I didn't have a clue. I could, you know what? I'm not a naive bloke with my eyes closed, and I would quite happily hang him myself, but I didn't have a clue. Would never have suspected it. Never. No. It was always in our house. It was always we lived on a council estate opposite the church, and when they had new priests come, my mum would always have them around for dinner. And they were wonderful. In fact, one of my favourite human beings I've ever met was a guy called Father Kidani, who was from Ethiopia, and he learned English in a seminary college in Rome and in our house. And so he had this kind of funny accent that you big Egypt, and he had learned English from an Irish woman. And you know, so for me, I was brought up really. It was very central to everything that we did, and so it's just interesting now how I see how there seems to be more of a revival. I go to America quite often, and there seems to be a big revival coming here from there.
Well, one of my favourite things about my experience of church life, I suppose, is, well, in fact, the very first book I did was called So a Comedian Walks into a Church, and it was a memoir, I suppose, life on the road as a Christian and as a comedian. It was about the Saturday night gigs and about the Sunday mornings where I'd woken up across country doing a gig somewhere, and I would try a different church. You know, I would go and I would deliberately try and find a different sort of church than the church I go to back home. Wow. And not only that, but then since being booked to do church events, you see all flavors of church. And I
yeah.
love the fact you can see they're all different. Some have more similarities than others, but Anglican, Baptist, Methodist, Quaker, very quiet gigs, the Quakers, just sitting there eating porridge, But there's
What about
the
Shaker
works.
Quakers? Have you met the Shaker Quakers?
I haven't met too many Shaker Quakers, but they've shake their porridge, yeah. But they're lovely, a Salvation Army with the band, and there's a real mix. And the bits they've got in common are, they're all finding their way about, okay, if there's a God, how should we respond to that fact, and what do we do about it? My regrets are, what I want to do as well, I'd love to do another book, which is so a comedian walks into, I need to snap your title, but other places of worship, So I've been.
Yeah, I think that one is working on a bit there, mate. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah,
I think that one's so it's snappier.
It's a little bit snappier, a little bit shorter, but when I've been to a mosque and a synagogue, and I've not been to a Hindu temple yet, but
it's great.
I just but I love the fact. Well, my daughter this week, I'm doing a pause for thought for Radio 2 this week about the fact that my daughter in her playground is chatting to her Hindu friend about Diwali, and they're puzzling out what the differences are, but what they've got in common between like Diwali and Christmas. And they've worked out that they have, both the celebrations of light in the darkness, both have lots of food, gatherings and family and all these sorts of things. And my daughter's 8, and I love the fact that's not come from a lesson. That's just them in the playground chatting about, why do you do what you do? I do it like this. And then she comes.
But is that how a kind of non-secular kind of person should think?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think back to my I know our previous my kids' previous school, we often get these little notes back from school saying we've got religious education thing this week, or we're off to Harvest Festival, we've got a Jewish person visiting. Please remember, you can withdraw your child from all religious education lessons, and some did. But at the same time, read the paper, and the Tory party were puzzling out a definition of Islamophobia. The Labour Party were having these problems with anti-Semitism, and couldn't even agree if they were or weren't. And at the same time, you see the next generation of kids not learning,
just get on with it,
what the differences are, and people not knowing what's the difference between a Hindu and a Muslim. And that's the stuff I think they've got to teach in schools. And even if they don't, or even if we're grown-ups, whatever, just be curious, by all means, ask questions or don't ask questions. But if there's an opportunity to work out that the person next door to you, do they do Ramadan? Do they do Diwali? It might be handy to know just roughly whether.
Yeah, it's just food, mate. It's always food. That's my take.
That's true.
Well,
food or
when
not food.
When I was a kid, I went to Cubs, and if you was like Cub of the Week, you could go to church parade and carry the flag.
Oh yeah.
And I was never allowed to go because it was Church of England and it was Union Jack. I was never allowed to go.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Never understood that. Well, I want to ask you, how did you cope with lockdown? With not working and with the isolation and losing that buzz of?
Yeah, it's been weird. It still is weird a bit, really. I mean, coming back now, September was really busy, and then October, November quite quiet. December really busy again. So we're not sort of back, But last year was, as a family, we felt like that first 2-3 weeks, we felt the massive dip. I saw the work cancel straight away. I think we were like a week ahead of the government. We took our kids out of school a bit early, all those sorts of things. And I was in a glut. I was in a gloom of I was down, and but it meant then I had a couple of gigs that didn't fully cancel. I had one guy last March who said, we got to cancel the gig in March, probably. And I thought, yes, you definitely, because there's a pandemic going on. He said, can we reschedule for May? I thought, May? You're kidding me. This is going to go on and on. Yeah, and then he kept on he kept on getting in touch every 2 months saying, I think we better push it back to this, 8 times or so, But the problem with that is I felt that he kept being disappointed over and over again at each one. And I had certain friends like that who took a while, I think, to deal with it. I felt like we went down fast, and then we've been slowly, kind of dealing with the fact, really. And the kids have been great. I've got an 8-year-old, 11-year-old, homeschool, all that sort of stuff. We got Ofsteded day one, typically, you know.
Brilliant.
But
how did you cope? You yourself, what did you do to get through it then? Did you just keep working,
so the family kept me busy, certainly, because my wife then went out to work. She's not been doing paid employment for about a decade, so she got a job at the hospital. So suddenly I was.
She can do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
She can do it. Oh.
And she was keen to. She wanted, in fact, just before the pandemic, she wanted to go back to work. So just coincided with this. So we changed a lot in our house, but I was still trying to write, although a lot of the TV jobs slowed right down because production slowed right down.
Yeah.
I threw a lot into this podcast I've been doing on the history of broadcasting. So a big sort of project on the origins of the BBC and stuff, which is the novel I'm writing, and it's the TV drama, it's a podcast. So I've thrown a lot into that. Having a thing to focus on really helped. And those little things, the bits of when we had the daily exercise and focusing on some, we did a lot of board games with the kids, things like that. But I'm well aware, teaching now as I'm doing at the University of Winchester, hearing from these students, many of them who spent a lot of the last year at home, like in their student accommodation, in a room on their own, and they've not seen, they've missed out a lot. So I really feel for people who I think maybe haven't fully dealt with how difficult it's been, or have had really tricky year and a half. Yeah.
Would you have your top tip? Because every week I ask my guests to have a tip on well-being. Would you have get something to focus on? Would that be a very important one, do you think?
Well, I think I mean, for me, I work in lists. I just generally always have done, always will do. If it's on a list, it gets done. And I know that when I'm busy, I know that it helps me work out what to do when. It also helps me when I'm not busy, because it means I can make a little note of, if the days are quiet, I can think, well, let's do this, this, and this. And then I can tick them off, get it done. And it feels like I've done something. It doesn't have to be major things, but it can just feel like, okay, a slight sense of achievement on that, bit of thing to focus on there, something. And it can be whether it's an exercise thing, whether it's a project we're working on, whether it's something to do with the family, but it means that I found that each day there is something. And I try not to overdo that list. I don't put 12 things on it, or maybe put 3 things on it, or if I get to that other thing, I'll be happy. And it's always something that's, achievable, maybe a bigger job, and something else, if I can get to it, then I will. And certainly balancing 9 different jobs or whatever, that's how I get through it. But also, for the quieter times, it helps me to do that. But making sure that in there is that time for whatever it is.
But also, look, your equipment failed, and you just got up and sorted it, right? I've had guests on their laptops not worked, and they've shut it down and just disappeared. So you've got that brain that you're not going to be beat. You strike me as someone who's very resilient, doesn't get beaten easily, and that you prevail.
Well, do you know what? Actually, something we've not talked about at all is when I was a kid, I was actually in Great Ormond Street for quite a long time, and I was not well. I was not a well kid, and I was my thing I do on stage. I was born without a belly button. My bladder was on the outside when I was born. I've had about 99 operations before I was 5. Frustratingly, one short of 100, but hey. And but I think certainly my wife often says that sense of resilience that I think that would give you. And I know a lot of the friends I've made in hospital when I was a kid, I'm still friends with now. And you can see that, if you deal with something like that early on, perhaps that puts you in stead for the other challenges to come. But I mean, generally, if bad stuff happens, I do try and have that sense of resilience, but also well aware of my limitations and know that I can't do everything.
That is great.
I can't do everything.
I've got to tell you before you go that I hate belly buttons, man. So I envy your lack of a belly button. If anyone touches my belly button, I will vomit. I can't. Honestly, I'm very open in everything I do. I'm not repressed in terms of my sexuality and that. But my belly, touch my belly button. I'm like, can't cope with it. So I admire you even more now.
Touch my belly button. I'd be impressed.
Mate, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. The hour has just flown by.
It has, crazy.
I do really I wish you all the best with all your future enterprises. And I occasionally do say this to people. It's funny how in life, we meet people, we don't realise the impact that they have on us, right? But you actually had a very big impact on me when I started doing stand-up, because you gave me hope that I didn't have to follow this path that everybody else was on. So as I've watched your career and watched you develop, I've actually been quite inspired by you, mate.
Well, it's very kind of you to say, and it's a lovely thing to hear. And it's actually, well, here's the thing. I bumped into John, not John, he's not Joe Lycett, very famous comedian, and I bumped into a couple of years ago, and I'd not realised this, but he said, "By the way, do you realise that he said that I started stand up because I saw your Edinburgh show years ago as a punter," and he said he just sort of thought, "Oh yeah, it's." If he's doing it, anyone can, basically. But in the, it was a bit kinder than that. But basically, he sort of saw it and thought, "Oh yeah, okay, this isn't kind of an outrageous, it's not Billy Connolly, it's not." But you can get up with some good ideas, go and have a chat, make an audience.
I remember the
laugh,
Spinning Jenny. Do you remember the Spinning Jenny play?
I do, yeah. That was about the same time that he was talking about it.
Yeah, I remember seeing that and thinking, I like this. I like what this guy does. But
that's very kind of you.
Yeah.
Well, may I say as well, I love the fact you're doing this as well. And it's a great. I've over the years seeing the way you've branched out from straight stand up into this sort of area, doing something that no one else is really doing, and all power to you. So well done.
Oh, thank you, man.
Terrific.
Well, hopefully I'll bump into you at some stage. In the meantime, mate, stay safe, and thank you so much for coming along this evening. I really appreciate it. Hope to speak to you soon. All the best, mate.
Cheers,
Take
boss.
care, yeah?
Nice.
Cheers, mate. So that was Paul Kerensa. I could talk to him all day. He's just a really lovely guy. He's just got a lovely, genial, gentle manner about him. But what's interesting was that he's very functional. He's got this idea that have something to focus on and make a list. And neither of us are clinicians or practitioners, but his little idea about getting up and having something to focus on, making that list, that kind of fits in with what we try and do every week when we ask people to give us some of their ideas about how do they cope. Like this is a guy who writes for television who's at the top of his game, and you think, well, how did he get there? How does he manage to maintain it? Steve Greg, one of the comments that we've had tonight saying thanks. I appreciate you coming along, Steve. Thank you very much. Each week we look for our top tips for wellness. As I say, if we remember, Eric McElroy is saying finding something to do and push on with it, which fits in with what Paul was saying tonight. Jen Brister's swimming in cold water. That's never going to happen, Jen, especially now they're emptying the toilets into the sea. Gribbo saying don't be too hard on yourself. Very, very profound. If you remember when we had Sol Bernstein on, he talked about his own darkness when he thought about ending it all. And he came through that thinking life isn't always easy. Different people have got different tips. Marcus Bergman, who, as we know, has had a couple of strokes, but is still getting up there, talked about the importance of yoga and eating well. Danny Postil talked about making other people happy. And I guess as comics, we often do that. We will make other people happy, and sometimes to the detriment of ourselves. It's really important that we realize that, when we're struggling, if we can't notice it, maybe someone near us can see it for us. And maybe we could be the person to be the difference to someone going through a tough time. It's really important that you reframe unhelpful thoughts where you can. Try and be in the present. These are all good ideas, but if you are struggling, you may well need to get some sort of intervention or some practical help. If you know someone who's struggling, be the difference. Don't let them suffer on their own, because one of the bad things about mental unwellness is that you tend to suffer it all by yourself. If you notice someone's struggling, there are places you can go to get them help and to try to get them assistance. We have loads of information on the men's radio station website, which is a really, really good place to start. And also for some of the other shows that they have on there. There's something on 24 hours a day, all around the subject of wellness and well-being. Time to Change are a great organisation. If you need any help, type in timetochange.org.uk, as are mind.org.uk. But as I say, if you've got friends, look out for your friends. Make a phone call, chat to them, and let them know that they are important to you. Because I would much rather be sitting on a bench with you than sitting in a graveyard looking at your tombstone. The reality is that life is difficult. People do have a tough time, but it's something that we can get through. It's all part of our journey. Some of us are fortunate not to have bouts of mental ill health, but for those of us who don't, just need to know that you're not on your own, that things can get better and will get better. Like I said at the top of the show, the weather today has been fantastic for me because it's been raining and it's cold and it's dark and I love it. But I appreciate that not everybody enjoys that weather in the same way that I do. We'll be back Next Monday, I'd like to thank WJ, our sponsors, the UK's leading road marking specialists. Once again, as always, you take care, stay safe, and we'll see you next week.
Well, that's the end of another episode of Reading the Signs with me, Comedy John Ryan. We're here every Monday night at 7 p.m. talking with comedians about mental wellness, mental well-being, and just trying to get the conversation going. What we're trying to do is show that it's good to talk, and we're also trying to show that everybody can go through the same experiences. A massive thank you to the WJ Group who sponsored the show, showing their commitment not just to mental well-being, but also to reaching as broad an audience as possible. It's great to be part of the mensradiostation.com family, so do check us out on the website, on social media. We'll be back next Monday. You take care. Stay safe, everybody.